All right, so hello everybody. Welcome to another SQL Server Geeks Geek Talk. And not sure if you have been part of Geek Talks before, but a few weeks back, we decided to call out Thursday as a day of learning where we do multiple Geek Talks. In fact, every Thursday, we are doing 4 Geek Talks. 2 are done under SQL Maestros, and I do something around SQL Server internals, performance tuning and stuff. We just did something 3 hours before in the morning. Then we have a Geek Talk by SQL Server Geeks, which is this one, that the one you're attending right now. And then there is Data Platform Geeks Geek Talk, which will again happen later in the day, 6 p.m. India time and globally, whatever it is. So thank you very much for joining today. My name is Amit Bansal. I'm going to be your host, and I have our guest with us, Uwe Ricken from Germany. The whole idea of Geek Talk is to just have a very free-flowing discussion, interactive, your questions, our answers, and and today's topic is optimization, SQL Server optimization. And the whole idea of these Geek Talks, of course, one of the things is as part of these events that we're doing, we're also promoting the community-driven event called Data Platform Virtual Summit, which is the background pic that I have. And very excited that just last week we released part 2 of our breakout sessions, and we got more than 100 sessions on the roster right now. So one of the biggest takeaways of this community-driven conference, which used to happen in India, in Bangalore, last 5 years, now, for all obvious reasons, have gone virtual. And the few great things that we are doing is the event is running 24/7, non-stop, 72 hours. And of course, pre-cons and post-cons, if you add, it's like a 10-day event running round the clock with 64 team members spread across different geographies. So that's an amazing thing we are doing. So whichever time zone you are in, you can be part of it. The other thing that we are doing is we're sharing all the recordings, classes, training classes are being recorded, pre-cons and post-cons, and even all the 200 breakout sessions are going to be recorded, and we will make them available to the registered delegates at no extra cost. So log on to dataplatformvirtualsummit.com and check out these things yourself. Now, let's get started with today. So, Uwe, welcome. Thank you for taking out time, being part of this Geek Talk, and it's always lovely to talk to you. You have been part of DPS before. So, today's topic is SQL Server optimization. But before we dive into SQL Server internals, which I'm sure you and we both love doing that, why not first introduce yourself to the audience about your experience with SQL Server? Uwe is a fellow MVP and MCM, and I know him for many years, and he is one of the great voices and an expert in SQL Server internals and optimization. That's why he's our guest today. Over to you, Uwe.
Yeah, thank you very much, Amit. Yeah, it's really a pleasure for me being here and doing this 1-hour stream with you together about SQL Server optimization. Yeah, my name is Uwe. I'm coming from Germany. I'm a so-called Uhu. It's called under 100 because I'm over 50, but I love to work with SQL servers in the last, I would say, 25 years so far. It all started with doing some developments. I think most of the attendees started SQL Server by developing a database application. And in 2008, I became a DBA, first-time DBA in a big bank here in Germany. And the problem is my perception was, hey, come on, I know everything about SQL Server. But that was, to be honest, an absolutely failure because I could develop fine, but not in the depth I know from now on. And in 2008, with in the Deutsche Bank in Germany, I learned so many things about configuration, setup, security of SQL Server. I was absolutely not aware of how many features you have in SQL Server. And yeah, in 2012, 2013, I became a Microsoft Certified Master. That was the greatest journey in my life. Really, it took me 4 years for learning. And yeah, since 2013, I'm working as a consultant for Microsoft, for example, helping customers to make SQL Server faster. Yeah, and that's my passion.
Perfect. Awesome movie. Great introduction. And, I know you have great experience behind yourself. So friends, this is going to be very discussion focused, and SQL Server optimization, internals, performance tuning is such a huge topic. There cannot be a start and there cannot be an end. So we just kind of talk and discuss. So bring in your questions, put them in Q&A panel, and we'll take your questions as they come. Those who are watching in YouTube, you can put your question in the chat window. If you want to flip over to the Zoom control, you can go to sqlservergeeks.com/live. If you go to that page, you have the Zoom link and you can pop over inside Zoom. So let's get started. While questions are coming in the Q&A panel, Uvi,
Yeah.
as I said, I mean, I do not have a single question to begin with. So let's talk about optimization in your recent engagements, consulting engagements, and your recent experiences. What are the common performance patterns that you are seeing with SQL Server? The reason why I asked this question to you is because I have seen customers' hardwares are really going big, you know, a lot of CPU, a lot of memory. And sometimes we think that because the hardware is so powerful, we will have less performance issues. But
Yeah.
then if best practices are not being followed, and I mean, just having great hardware doesn't mean all things get solved automatically. So in recent times when hardware is so powerful, what kind of performance problems you are still seeing, and how are you kind of solving them?
Well, where should I start? So we have so many issues concerning optimization because, if a customer calls me, it mostly is in general, performance problem what they have. And we have to separate between the brand new SQL Server 2019, or let's say from 2014 to 2019 problems. And what we have to talk about is general performance problems. And what I see mostly in the field is, let's say, a wrong configuration of the SQL Server. Just to mention a few things: wrong configured tempdb, all the database and log files and tempdb and system databases on just one drive, wrong formatting disks because they are not working with 64 kilobytes, but they're working with 4 kilobytes. And I don't want to blame the people who are installing SQL Server or doing the development with SQL Server, but Microsoft, to be honest, made a pretty cool job starting with 2016 when, just for example, the tempdb configuration was a part of the setup. And that was from that days on, me and my team, we didn't have so much problem with the tempdb directly. With 2019, you have seen when you installed 2019, suddenly you were able to configure max degree of parallelism. What is a cool thing, because basically when you install SQL Server before 2016, what is the default setup? Max degree of parallelism is 5. Really ugly these days because the value is coming from the 80s. TempDB, just only one file, all database files and system database files on just one drive, no recommendation for the formatting a disk or disk layout. And these problems are going step by step behind. But I would say from my daily experiences, I would say I have around 30 to 40% really wrong configured SQL servers for performance issues, not security issues. And the rest is, I would say, a little bit difficult because it goes very, very deep, sometimes very, very deep into development. Just to name one big issue, what many developers have, because they are thinking in a procedural and not in a set-based way. And what they are doing is, I can completely understand it. For example, they are using functions, user-defined functions. But the key point here is that the developers do not know what the difference, for example, between an inline function or a multi-line function or a Scala function. And that drives the application very crazy. So the best effort I had was tuning down a query from 5 minutes to less than 1 millisecond, just only by changing the query itself, not anything about indexing. Another big challenge for developers is nowadays, I would say in the last 4 or 5 years, the developers are way more confronted with big data. And with big data, I mean big databases in SQL Server. When normally, let's say 5, 6 years ago, I was dealing with databases 200 to 500 gigabytes. Sounded at that time very, very big. But nowadays, I'm dealing with customers who have 10 to 20 terabyte databases. And that is a completely different challenge from the optimization perspective as it is with a small database. And that makes it so interesting to work day by day with different customers. and with different problems. And for me, to be honest, it's every single day a new learning, by the way. Just an example, I was never dealing with partitioning. I would say I started with partitioning 3-4 days, 3-4 years ago. I knew the technique, I know what it is, I know how it works, but I never was confronted with that. And nowadays, with these big databases, it's way more important to think about partitioning than the days before or the years before, just as an
Right.
example.
Perfect. Uvi, I think when you talked about max degree of parallelism, probably you meant cost threshold of parallelism because that's the default value 5.
Sorry, yeah, sure, yes. And
Yeah.
the max degree is 0. Oh, sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
So yeah, so friends, this is good. I mean, with these geek talks, that's what I recommend. You may take a few notes. So tempdb placement of files, talking about these default values which are there at the server level, which were set years back, decades back, so to say. And now you have an opportunity to reconfigure them during the setup, because as Uvi mentioned, most of the times we go with the vanilla setup, and post installation we kind of don't change these values, whatever is suitable for your environment. Now, coming back to about the partitioning, I think great that you brought up that topic, because I think partitioning is a wonderful feature. And surprisingly, I myself do not see enough of partitioning being implemented in environments, where databases are quite huge. And when I say databases are quite huge, there are probably just 2 or 3 those big tables that run into hundreds of GBs, and there might be hundreds of tables that are relatively very small, but it's just, I mean, a bunch of handful of tables that are quite big. And the reason I see that happening is because, let's say SQL Server was deployed in that environment years back when those tables were very small, and data in those tables just continued to grow. And today they have become so huge. But because partitioning was not implemented years back, it still just runs that way. So with your experience now, because you have done some deep work in partitioning, what best practices recommendation do you have, or how can people get started where they can partition those big tables, and what advantages would they get?
Well, yeah. So yeah, partitioning is an absolutely great feature. I would say most of the misconception about partitioning is that developers think, well, when we partition our database or our table, it's becoming fast. And this is something what I mostly say to the developers, say, no, that's not the reason why you can use or should use partitioning. Partitioning is more a part of technique, what you will use in data warehouses for fast loading data into your data warehouse. It could be a performance improvement, because when SQL Server does not have to scan the whole table, instead of the whole table, just only one smaller part of the table. But when I talk about partitioning, I mostly come to the point where I say it's a good way to administer big databases. Just to give you an example, let's say you have a table with 1 billion rows in it from orders, and when you have all this data in your table, what will happen if you have to restore, let's say, a 10 terabyte database? And that takes a long time. And if your SLA, your service level agreement, does not allow you to downtime less than, let's say, 30 minutes or an hour, then the 10 terabyte database cannot be restored in time. So, and then partitioning is a pretty cool technique to solve this problem, because what I do then is, let's say we have 10 years of data, 10 years of orders. And what I do then is I just only create a partition function for the order date to say, okay, please distribute every single order placed on a file group, which is separated per year. And what I do then is, because most of the requests by the customers is, I want to have the data of the last 3 years, which should be actually, or can be updated, or can be reloaded, whatever. What I do then is, if I have for 10 years a separate database file, a separate file group, and I set them to read only, then, and that's a fascinating technique, I can restore my database only with the read and write file groups. And then I can take the phone and say, come on, you can work now with your data. And in the meantime, I can restore all the other years in the background, and the customer is not aware of it, what I'm doing. And that is a great feature for being in my SLA, what I have from the customer, as an example. Another very great point is, I think lots of people are currently dealing with data warehouse technologies. And data warehouse, to be honest, when I read blogs, when I look videos in YouTube or in other channels, it seems to be, hey, come on, data warehousing is an easy job. It isn't. Because the biggest challenges you have with data warehouses is the ETL, to optimize the ETL processes. And what will you do if you load, let's say, a million data rows into your table and the table gets locked? That is a nightmare. And well, partitioning can help there, because what I can do then is I fill the data into a separate table, which is completely independent. It only it has to be on the same partition layout. And what I then can do is just with one metadata operation, say, switch it in. And that's it. So it takes only a few seconds for a lock instead of lots of minutes. That's another big point for partitioning. And I have two sessions about that. One is dealing with the basics of partitioning to explain how partitioning is working. And I have another one which is focused only on data warehouse technologies and restore backup technologies.
Perfect. Awesome. So I think two important key takeaways, Uwe, what you mentioned. One was, I think you gave a good example of the sliding window scenario, which is like partitioning the order data with active data and passive data. And I think the other feature is the partition level locking. That is a great feature. So, friends, if you are taking notes, take notes when you are doing partitioning, or if you're trying it out. Remember, sliding window scenario is a very common scenario with partitioning. But the other thing, and I'm very thankful that Uwe did mention about the partition level locking feature, because in some environments where I see partitioning is being implemented, people have not taken advantage of partition level locking feature, because even after implementing partitioning, the default is to lock the table, and that can be changed to lock just the partition. So that change needs to be done manually. It doesn't happen automatically.
Yeah.
So yeah, great. I mean, lovely discussion. Feel like carrying on. So friends, I have a few more things that I want to talk to Uwe about, and I will continue to do that. If you have questions, please put them in Q&A panel, and we'll just start picking them up the moment discussions get over. And if you're in YouTube or other live platforms, use the chat window. My team members will pull the questions out from there. Uwe, when it comes to the recent versions of SQL, like 2019 and 17, etc., and we see a lot of I mean, you did one session last time in Virtual Symposium, also a bit of that with all this intelligent query processing features, families. Where has the life become easy for developers in DBS, and where has it become difficult? Because I'm sure nothing is like fit all scenarios.
Yeah. So what I would say. So first of all, the Query Optimizer team did a so great job since 2017 with this intelligent query processing, and they are not at the end. So they always ask us as an MVP, hey, what can we do better? We had lots of calls. Maybe you have attended the PGI group meetings the same way as I did. And it was so interesting to see what the team is planning to do and what is currently implemented in SQL Server. You mentioned it, intelligent query processing was first time, I think, introduced with 2017, as far as I know. With for example, just some keywords.
Automatic tuning or something, yeah.
Automatic tuning. Then we have the memory grant feedback, absolutely perfect feature. Sometimes it really helps. And from my point of view, because I have a lot to do with developers, there is a great improvement in the use of functions. And that's what I did in the last virtual symposium for Data Geeks, is that they have improved the usage of functions. I said it in the first minutes, functions are mostly a big problem and a big challenge in development. I can understand developers why they are using it, but a few problems, just for example, if you take a multi-line function, then the estimated number of rows which get returned from the function are mostly completely underestimated. Just as an example, I think it's 100. It was 100. So what Microsoft did now is it's called deferred compilation, just as an example. And what SQL Server then will do, they will give you way better estimates if you use a function, a multi-line function. The inline function is the same as it was before. And that is, from my point of view, a really great benefit, especially for developers. Memory grant feedback. I know lots of developers who are working with functions but don't know how it works, and the same with the memory consumption when they have so-called stop operators in their execution plans. For example, a hash join is a typical stop operator which requires memory in the same way as a sort operator. And mostly when you surf through the internet, you will see, oh my goodness, my query is so slow, and I see lots of work on TempDB, for example. And that is that SQL Server underestimates the number of rows, and then the requested memory for execution is way too less for SQL Server. And what does this mean? Well, SQL Server, let's say, is estimating, oh, give me 1 megabyte of memory because I'm expecting just only a few rows coming into the sort operator. And then suddenly not only 100 rows are in, but let's say 100,000. And the biggest problem was before 2019 that the granted memory could not be changed when the execution was running. Same with 2019, by the way. But what 2019 is doing then is say, hey, come on. There was a mistake in the memory grant. I see it. Let's do, when the query comes the next time, give it a little bit more memory. And the same is the opposite when SQL Server was expecting way more rows coming in. So it requested, let's say, 500 megabytes of memory for the sort operation. And then suddenly just only a few rows were coming in. And that means there is a completely big discrepancy between the requested memory and the really used memory. And what SQL Server then will do with 2019 is it's adjusting it automatically for the second time, when the second time the query is coming in. That is a brilliant feature. And by the way, to avoid these kind of memory problems, one tip is run your statistics update mostly every single day. Have a maintenance window for updating statistics.
Indeed, Uvi. No, very valuable inputs out there. And I'll tell you, Uvi, I would like to continue this discussion, but we have a bunch of questions coming in. I think people who work with SQL Server day in, day out will always have so many questions. Before I think we just have 5 minutes, before the Q&A time begins, but no problem. We can always continue this performance discussion with questions. Why not? But before I jump into questions, just want to let the audience know about Uvi's class. So give me an opportunity, 2 minutes, and I would like to talk about this. Maybe that's up on your screen. This is Uvi Ricken's class at Data Platform Virtual Summit. It's an 8-hour class divided into 4 hours each day. So, you just spend 4 hours on 2 days. And this is on analyze and optimize your SQL Server. Very popular class, deep dive stuff on SQL Server internals, troubleshooting, and performance tuning. So feel free to tune in. You can just visit dataplatformvirtualsummit.com and learn more about the summit, learn more about the class. And the best part is, apart from attending this class live, you will also get the recording. So we are very thankful to Uvi and all our training class speakers who have agreed that the class could be recorded and could be shared with delegates at no extra cost. So that is what community is all about. So tune in to dataplatformvirtualsummit.com and you can learn more. Now, Uvi, any comments about your class? I mean, maybe do you want to just kind of say, what are you going to cover in 8 hours? Maybe people want content,
yes.
right?
Yes. So yeah, so it's starting by the investigation of the configuration of your SQL Server. We are checking together. So if you okay, you have all your laptops with you. Basically, this is a class where normally on site people are should do it by but should run the scripts by themselves and to check their SQL Server. You can do that the same way. I give away all my scripts, which I'm using when I'm running investigation on my customer side. What we are doing, we are checking best practice for the configuration of the SQL Server, best practice of the configuration of the OS platform, Windows, so about disk layout, all this kind of stuff. And then we are going on for best practices for database layout, for how should your database be implemented in your SQL Server that you get the best benefits out of it. Choose your disks wisely for, just for example, where should your log file be and where should your database file or files should be. What is the benefits if you have more than one database file, that you distribute the data over more than one database file? What trace flags are important for the setup if you don't use 2016 or newer? And then we go for the best practice configuration for TempDB to see when TempDB has an issue. How can we investigate that? We go through different setups for databases like read committed snapshot isolation, database scoped configuration settings, and then last part is analyze indexes used in your database and to see how, for example, a proper index may help to increase the performance of the queries. See the most expensive queries ordered by, let's say, the number of executions. See the top 10 queries or top 100 queries by memory consumption, by I/O consumption, by CPU consumption, and analyze them and get a better and a great picture of your system, understand your system. That is the key point, the takeaway for the attendees, that they have some tools at their hand and seeing or get an overview of how the SQL Server is working and what could be improved. And the troubleshooting tools, what I will use heavily in this demo-based, mostly demo-based workshop is extended events and the Perfmon. These both tools are, for me, the most important tools to investigate and analyze a SQL Server.
And bunch of DMVs, lot of DMVs.
Lots of DMVs, yes, lots of DMVs.
Yeah. Right, Uvi. Thank you so much for giving this quick overview about your class. Let's get started with the questions. So first question Athav has is, hi Uvi, thanks for your time. My question is, where do we start when we see SQL Server generally slow overall? We do not have a specific complaint, but it is like general slowness and queries are taking time to execute. A very common question, Uvi. Yeah.
Yes, it is. So yeah, what I'm doing is very, very simple. I think most of the attendees know Paul Rendell from SQL Skills. He's one of the renowned speaker and SQL experts in the world. And what I could strongly recommend whenever I go to a SQL Server, the very first thing what I'm doing is I want to see the weight statistics of your SQL Server, because the weight statistics is like reading an open book. Think about when you're going to a doctor and you say to the doctor, hey, come on, I am ill, I'm not feeling well. And what the doctor then is doing, he's asking you questions. And these, the answers of these questions, hey, where does it hurt? How long did it hurt? All this kind of stuff can be investigated by the weight stats analysis. And that is the very first thing, for one simple reason. If one customer is coming to me and say, hey, Uwe, my SQL Server is running slow, I don't know where to look, then I need, first of all, to focus on a particular problem, and that can be resolved by having the first look to the weight stats. Just as an example, give me an example. Let's say you see that most of the weights are parallelism weights, CX packet, and you see that it is way over 80%, just an example. And then I could definitely say, hey, customer, I think that the parallelism might be a problem. And the good thing here is I know immediately where to look. What will I do? I look for the configuration of the max degree of parallelism and the cost threshold for parallelism immediately. And the third thing what I'm doing then is I run my script for getting the 50 most expensive queries ordered by the DOP, degree of parallelism value, and that I can see then, oh my goodness, I see these are the queries which are running in parallel, and maybe it could be that a proper index can solve this. For an example, another example, I see, let's say, high page IO ledgers. Page IO ledgers does mean that SQL Server is waiting for requested data coming from the disk. If I see, let's say, a page IO ledge for a shared log and the average time is 50 milliseconds, then I would say, come on, there must be a problem maybe with storage. Yeah? And then I can go and look for storage issues. And that is the way how I deal with that. My opening door, whenever I think that there are problems with the SQL Server, is the query from Paul Rendell about the weight stats statistics. Absolutely great. I love this query. It's my daily business.
Daily, yes, indeed. Yeah, so yeah, long answer there, Atharv. So of course, a lot of things to be done, and weight stats are a good place to begin. Uvi, the next question is from Ole, and the question is, Uvi mentioned about 2 sessions on partitioning. Are they part of Data Platform Virtual Summit?
It's your choice.
Yeah, so yes, only they are part of DPS, and yeah, it's very reasonably priced. So come on board. No, don't worry. Yeah. Okay. Next question is from Arti, and the question is: we have a reporting stored procedure running very frequently and running slow. We want to improve the performance of the report and trying to look into execution plan and getting lost by looking into it. So getting lost with execution plans, common problem.
Yes.
Could you please guide us how to identify problematic operators that we could immediately look into? Sorts we are looking into, but other than sort, what else can we observe?
Yeah. This is truly a big problem, understanding or reading execution plans, because as it has been said, an execution plan is not like we do it. We all speak are doing it in our demo. A very simple, let's say, a few operators. It could be hundreds of operators. To be honest, the Management Studio is, for me, not the right tool for investigating execution plans. What I love as my favorite tool is the SentryOne Plan Explorer. It's free. Everybody can download it, and the good thing is that you can implement it into the SQL Server Management Studio. So just a right click on your on your execution plan, say open it in SentryOne Plan Explorer, and the Plan Explorer gives you way better information about what is the most the most expensive operator, because you see it in red, just for example. And what I'm doing, if I don't have SentryOne Plan Explorer in the at the customer side, what I'm doing is just don't look only to the operators. Have a look to the properties of each operator. What are my first things what I look for? First thing what I'm looking for is, are there any table or index scan operators? A scan operator basically means, oh my goodness, we have to scan the whole table or the whole index. Second thing what I'm looking for is so-called push-down predicates. A push-down predicate is a filter, and a filter does mean very easy to explain. Let's think about the morning you wake up and you want to have a cup of coffee. So when you grab your mug, you put in your coffee, and then you go to the fridge and put a tiny little box of milk into your coffee. That is the same as an index seek. But if you have a push down predicate, you are acting as follows. You stand up in the morning, you grab your mug, you put your coffee in, but then you take your smartphone and calling the dairy, and then you're asking for, let's say, 10,000 liters of milk. And while you are waiting in your garden for the truck, it's coming. And what you're doing then is you're just only taking this little tiny portion of milk out of the truck and the rest you push away. And that is a push down predicate. It's the same. So for a little amount of data, you're taking too many resources to gain it. And that is something what I'm looking for. Third thing what I'm looking for, does any of your stop operator have an exclamation mark sign at it? That is an indice, how do you say? This is
Warning.
an
Warning.
indicator, yeah, an indicator for you that there must be a problem on it. It could be separate things. For example, sort operator, typically thing sort spill. Hash operator, hash spill. And if you have it on the output operator, the select operator, then I would say there can only be two reasons. The first one is the spill operator, and the second one is that, and that is a problem which happens very, very often. You're taking the wrong data type for the predicate, and there's a precedence in operators, and that is something what you all should have in your mind when you're dealing with data types. Just an example. You have a varchar field, and you say select star from customers, where customer name, customer is a varchar, equal to n, and then the name. So that means that you take a Unicode character, an n varchar. What will happen? SQL Server need to scan the index or the table, whether you have an index on the customer name or not, because the Unicode is on a precedence higher than the varchar. So that means that the varchar column has to change into a n varchar, and that needs to scan the table. That's a points where I'm looking for. And the last point, what I'm doing is, if I have complex queries, really complex queries, like your store procedure, one, from my point of view, great tip, use extended events. Go with extended events on a statement level, on a store procedure statement level, and capture the post-execution plan. It's expensive, I know. The execution plans is the most expensive part in that X event, but that will help you to analyze it afterwards when the process has done, and you can go step by step through it. Great tool, X events, love it. That will be shown in my class.
Yes, yes, indeed. Too many things to obviously look for.
Yes.
So, long answer to that question. I'm looking at the chat window. Looks like there are two questions from YouTube, but I just not able to comprehend the question. So maybe I may ask the attendee to rephrase and post it again, but I'll still call it out. Uvi, maybe you can get this. What are the best practices, principles to choose? What to implement in DB, in SQL, and what to implement in general purpose or business language within the system?
Yeah, I understand the question.
Okay, please.
Yeah, that's a little bit difficult. It depends on the requirements of the customer, and it depends on the knowledge of the developers. But long story short, everything what deals with data, with lots of data, should be part of the database. The client should, from my perspective, only be a stupid client which is consuming data and is displaying data. Give you an example. Let's say you want to run an update on a product list. You want to increase the price by 10%. There are two different ways how to deal with that. The first one is, I saw it, to be honest, I saw it. You go with your application, within your application, grab the data with a select star from my articles, and then you go inside your application by firing update article number 1, set price equal to price multiplied with 1.1. And then you fire it against the SQL Server. And if you do it 1,000 times, that makes your application slow. But if you just only fire a general update statement against the SQL Server, say, update my article, set price multiplied by 1.1, for the whole table, then it is handled within milliseconds. And so therefore, it is a little bit difficult to say this one is better than this one. From the database perspective and from the performance perspective, it's way better to have the data operations completely handled by the database server. Another point I would like to mention here is I know that lots of people like to work with triggers. Triggers are pretty cool. I love it because you can put basic business rules into triggers. But the drawback of triggers is triggers are part of the user transaction. And that said is when you fire a statement against your table and the trigger is firing, then it's part of your transaction, and that expands the execution time of your basic transaction. And another thing based on triggers is lots of developers, I see it really very, very often, they are using triggers like procedural code. That means, for example, they are opening cursors in it, and then they go row by row by row by row through the table or through the inserted table, and that is not a good practice. So that will slow down your system. Long story short, everything what is dealing with data, everything what is manipulating data should be, from my perspective, part of the database. Displaying data, interacting with data should be part of the business layer.
Last question for this Geek Talk, not performance related, but what is the reason why syntax definition is not available, unlike other programming languages?
Syntax definition. Okay, yeah, I understand. I think that you mean the how do you
SSMS syntax is there in the query
yes.
window probably.
Yeah. So what you have is this I don't know
templates.
the name.
Templates.
Yeah, the intelligence. So what is it? When you type in and you see the names and you see the
IntelliSense.
IntelliSense. Yes. Sorry. Yes. So yeah. IntelliSense in SSMS, it's not really cool, but there are tools outside. My absolutely favorite for that, for checking, not checking syntax, but giving you or is automatically formatting everything for you. And is if you, for example, if you select star from, and the star will automatically be expanded by column names. There are two great tools on the market. With the one I favorite, attention, it's commercial. The one my favorite is SQL Prompt from Redgate, and another good candidate for that is the tool from Apex. It's the same. It's implemented in SSMS, and it's a great tool for developers in SSMS.
Right. Yes, friends. So that's where it is. Now, I am sure that all of you will have probably more questions, and I know questions are just flowing in, but we have this limited time. But this does not mean that your question will go unanswered. If you go to SQLServerGeeks.com, on the menu bar, you will have social. And if you just take the cursor over social, you will see a lot of links to our social media channels like Facebook, LinkedIn, and even Telegram, which could be on mobile or on desktop, and just post your question. So Uvi is of course part of some of those channels, and we have other folks as well, and even community can help you answering your question. So please continue to interact with your peers and with our speakers, and be part of the community. Well, with this, we wind up today's Geek Talk. Any closing thoughts, Uvi?
Yes, I'm absolutely happy to be part of this super great platform. What you have here realized, it's absolutely great what you're doing for the community, and I'm really happy to assist for you and for the community. I love to give my knowledge to the community, and I hope to see you in my workshop or in my sessions.
Thank you. Yes, friends, of course, research more about data platform, virtualsummit.com. Just log on to the website, explore, read thoroughly, see what you're going to get, and is it worth your time and money? And we'll see you. Now, friends, before we wind up and we close this Geek Talk, next week's Geek Talk, Thursday, as I said in the beginning, every Thursday we are doing all these free live trainings, live Geek Talks and demos. Next Thursday's schedule is already out. So just go to sqlservergeeks.com/live. Probably that's the place where you registered even for this one. Next week's Geek Talk on SQL Server Geeks is about query tuning. And just like Uvi, we have another expert from the community, Eric Darling. So that's going to be another fantastic session on internals and query tuning and performance stuff. So, a lot of great things coming up with our Geek Talks. Well, with this, friends, thank you very much. Hope it was worth your time. We are very grateful to Uvi. Uvi, thank you so much for joining us and taking our time to talk to us and the community. And friends, we will see you soon in any other upcoming free event or even at Data Platform Virtual Summit. Do give some feedback on social media about the learnings that you have got here. Goodbye and have a nice day. See you soon.
Goodbye.
Bye, Uvi. Take care.